Welcome to the Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world, hearing their stories about growing a business. Today's guest is going to teach us the importance of executing in your business. It's clear from his Instagram of 350,000 followers that he is a master at this, because if you look at the walls in the background, his whole room is covered in logos that he's designed. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty, the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, we're here today with James Martin. He's the founder of Baby Giant Design Co., a brand design agency based in the UK. James has helped hundreds of companies around the world build their dreams through his unique old school approach to brand identity. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the old school. Yeah, I like that. Still a bit analog, me, which is a little bit strange, even though I'm holding my Apple Pencil right now, which is probably naughty, but it's good for making notes. But yeah, nice to be here. And excited to chat, for sure.
Awesome. So my first question is, what would you say is the biggest thing that you did or you are doing that helped you to achieve the freedom to do what you enjoy?
Wow. Big question. And as every viewer and listener will now know, is that these were not pre-planned questions or answers from my end. So going totally off the cuff here. I think the one thing that has got me to where I am today and allows me to continue doing what I love is... it comes down to one word, and I think that's execution. I think there are a lot of people who not necessarily just talk a good game, but they have all these big dreams and they have all these things they want to achieve and they have all these clients they want to work for and they have all this mission of wanting to be an influencer or an entrepreneur, but they struggle with the execution side. And I think the difference between people who are seemingly making it and seemingly not making it is just that, it's execution. So I've always been very good at making a plan and executing on that plan. And obviously there's a lot of calculated risk within that, and not so much calculation with the risks, as every opportunity is a little bit different. But when I put my mind to it, I will do it. If I say I'm going to write a book, I'll write a book. If I say I'm going to build a course, I'm going to build a course. If I say I'm going to get 30 clients in a year, I'll make sure I get more than that. So I think it's just about execution, which has allowed me to... And the thing is, the funny thing is about the word execution is that it's only us kind of holding ourselves back a lot of the time, I think. And by executing and doing, it becomes easier to execute more and do more because you realise it's not so scary. I think a lot of the time, especially creative people, they hold themselves back a little bit, worried about what people might think, or am I good enough? Or, there's a lot of self-doubt, kind of negative self-talk, whereas I've very much learned to just stay in my lane, kind of follow. I know the person who I want to be, I know what I need to do to get there, and I do little things every single day to make sure that happens. Do you know what I mean? So good planning and execution, I would say, is where I go with that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I was going to say, assuming you would have stopped earlier, I was going to say what you mentioned as well, that describing it a little bit of a different way though, that it's like a muscle, that it can feel hard to work on executing in the beginning when you're struggling as a creator. But the more that you do it, the more it becomes just something that you can do. And I like that the way that you described it. Someone else that I've spoken with in the past on this show, Anthony Trucks, he had a interesting way of putting it, where you're talking about that, you're sitting there, you're focusing on this thing, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do. And it reminded me of what he said, that he calls it dark work. So it's the work that you're doing there in the dark, that you're not nobody else in the world really knows what's going on, but like this is like I'm focused, I'm doing this. And then once you've done that, now you can have the confidence, you have the so much more than the confidence, but like you know that like, hey, I've put all this in, I'm ready to go and get that result. And it helps everything, building your stamina, helping you move forward. I guess my follow-up question is, besides just trying to execute to build that up, what else would you suggest to somebody who maybe feels like they're struggling with executing to get better at that?
Yeah, I suppose you've got to know what you're looking to execute. So I suppose that comes down to a lot of like mission and purpose, and all those kind of nitty gritty words. I think everybody. I always say everybody. I hate to generalize, but it's so easy to generalize. But I think, on the whole, a lot of people are in a rush to get somewhere. I think especially with the rise of social media, the immediacy of content, the immediacy of like everybody's wanting now to be famous rather than build a career. Like it has to happen in 2 years. If it doesn't, I'm stopping. So, what everybody sees of me now has been 20 years in the making. Do you know what I mean? It's only really over the last 3 or 4 where things have started to kind of change a little bit. So, but throughout those 20 years, I have persevered. I have learnt a lot about myself, and I really, like, beyond anything, know exactly who I am. And I know exactly what I do for people. And I think that allows me to execute on my plans because there's no fluff, and I think it's like when you get to a certain point, there's going to be lots of opportunities that come your way from all sorts of directions. And what you got to do is you got to say no to the ones that don't align with the person that you want to become. There's no point executing on something that doesn't really align with that end goal for yourself. And I think, so if I could break it down to some kind of takeaway values, it would be like really understanding, like, firstly who you are. And I think you've got to have a very good grounding sense of who you are as a person. What are your values? What can you bring to people? What makes you different? Because was it like chances of us all being here like 400 trillion to 1 or something? Do you know what I mean? So I think there's not enough people who are leaning into their own characters. So that would be the first thing. And then, like, what can you offer people? Like, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, or whatever it is, or both. What is that thing? Really dial down that thing, and then who is that thing for? And I think understanding your audience is a really essential part for growth and execution, because I could know my services and know myself, but go down to the local, elderly home and try and sell my services there, and I'm not going to get any traction because they're not the right people who need my services or need the things that I'm doing. So sorry, that was nothing against elderly people. I love them, but I'm just trying to make the kind of comparison of like what the deal is. So, like, obviously knowing yourself, knowing what you do, and knowing who you do it for. When you mastered those things, or you have a good grasp of those things, and obviously you evolve, but that allows you to execute with more accuracy. Because when you're executing with accuracy, like, confidence rises and confidence grows. You're getting more yeses than you are nos. So then you understand, like, okay, more. And it can become addictive that way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think it's also something that, like, it's almost like you have to be like relentless at that thing that you're doing. And it's not so much even about the outcome. And the outcome almost doesn't matter when you get into that mindset. It's just like, I will do this no matter what, either way. It doesn't matter if whatever I did today turned into a success, I'm still going to do it tomorrow. And I think that mindset really helps you to get to that point and to show, like, where you are here today. You said you've been doing this 20 years now, and other people would be much quicker to give up on something where they could get there as well if they were consistent and persevered.
Yeah. Well, I think the word you mentioned there, relentless, is it. It's a relentless pursuit of something that you want, and still relentlessly pursuing it even when it's not going well. I don't want to go to work every day. I'd like to take some days off. I'd like to have more time with my family. But, I think you do obviously end up finding your own balance with that. Because I think if you do work for yourself and you're an entrepreneur of any sort, you probably do have a bit more of a blend life, because it's impossible. It's the addiction, it's the relentlessness of it. But I think, like, again, it's the execution side of it. Like, the people who turn up every single day, even when they don't want to, are the people that get somewhere, So I think that's something, like you said, that relentlessness it's almost an illness, I would suppose. I think if you look at it, and I think you'll know it as well. It's to get to where you want to be isn't easy, and it's not supposed to be easy, but it does get easier. It's never simple, but it does get easier the more you practice it and the more you try. Effort is free, after all.
Yeah, yeah, well said. All right, so we read about on your website and when we were looking you up, a little of your backstory, and your journey before building Baby Giant Design was quite challenging and complex. So we saw that, like, as a young man, you had to deal with abuse, a difficult situation at home, a drug addiction, and today you run this successful company, you're sober, and you have a reputation as one of the world's best logo designers. So can you share a little bit with our audience of how did you turn around that difficult situation into the personal and professional success you have today?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's still totally professional, but that's I'm trying harder every day to be more professional. Yeah, I mean, I think what's very important to kind of break down within this conversation is that everybody has a past, and I think you can either let it make you or break you. Mine was more challenging than some, but probably not as challenging as a lot of other people's out there. So I think for me, like you mentioned, like at the age of 11, I was sexually abused by my teacher at school, and that kind of set me on a bit of a, that happened at 11. I didn't tell anybody for a long time until I was like 18, 19, and that kind of dealing with that as a growing young man, at a boarding school with no real, being let down by teacher and not having my parents around and all the rest of it was quite a challenging thing to deal with, obviously inwardly. And through adolescence, I dealt with it through rebellion, drugs, alcohol, kicked out of school, kicked out of home, and then basically went on a massive bender for about 2.5 years, a bender being like a big session. I don't know. There's always a bit of a kind of translation thing, especially when I make up words and I'm English. So, but yeah, so I kind of just went, like, anybody of any authority, I just had no respect for, and that included my parents. And like that's ended up with me being kicked out of home. Like, just to kind of fast forward a little bit, me and my parents get on fantastically well now. I've grown up. I'm a very different person to what I was. But, I was stealing. I was doing a lot of drugs. I was drinking all the time, like doing drugs every single day. And what happened was, people talk about the moment everything changed. And it was after one big night out, which was probably on the back of loads of other big nights out. And I remember coming back still absolutely wired, probably still a little bit high, after driving back, naughty, and just sitting in bed, had to go in for work. I was working at a pub or a restaurant at that time, and I remember sitting there thinking, what on earth am I doing with my life? Growing up, I was captain of my sports teams. I was county rugby, county cricket, well-respected sportsman, and up until the age of about 15, 16, and that's when it started to kind of spiral. But I was kind of thinking back, and I had all this opportunity, good schools, caring parents, good sportsman, leader, and I felt like a loser. Do you know what I mean? I just felt like I wasn't fulfilling my potential. And that day, by no means did I stop doing drugs, but I thought I need to do something. I need to change this somehow. So I went and enrolled in a local college and put myself onto an art foundation. And then that art foundation got me onto, an HND graphic design course. And then that got me into a different graphic design kind of course at college. Then that got me into uni. And then the more I started to focus on kind of a path and I was being more distracted, the less drugs I was doing. I was getting rid of certain friendship groups, and I moved back home and, started to rebuild relationships and stuff. And then uni got me into my first design role, and then my first design role made me start Baby Giant, and then Baby Giant was growing, and then Made by James happened, and now me and you are sitting here, in 2023, 20 years later almost, from when I started that kind of journey from bed, gutter, loser, to somebody who's, now every day trying to wake up and trying to fulfill his potential. And like you said, I've stopped drinking. I haven't had a drink or anything for almost, since September 2021 now. So so life's great sober. Do you know what I mean? So I was achieving stuff while still drinking a lot, over the last few years, but wrote a book and all sorts of stuff. But I know to become the person I want to become, I need to look after myself better. I want to be a good dad for my baby boy. I want to be a good leader to other designers and people around me. And I know to do that, I've got to set a better example for myself. And I've got a lot to do. I need to live a long time. So not drinking is going to help that.
Cool. Yeah, well, I mean, I would agree with that. I don't drink either myself. But I think it's important, like that moment that you mentioned, that a shift happens in your mind where you realize, okay, this thing, whatever it is, I'm no longer willing to accept this, whatever, either the way you're being, the way things are happening to you, the situation you're in. You just say, hey, I'm no longer willing to accept this. Something has to change. And then often that can be the catalyst to really help you move forward.
Yeah, totally agree. And it will hit you like a brick wall, and sometimes I think I had to be, I was at rock bottom then, I would consider, and without being overly dramatic, it was either jail or no jail. Do you know what I mean? The stuff that I was doing, the groups that I was in, the stuff that I was doing at the time, so, and I think you have to get to that point, and the universe or whoever you think it is comes to you and says, make your decision now, because this is your last chance. And that's what I felt like it was. It was my, is either keep going down and never get back up, or stop and reevaluate.
Yep. So with your design agency, you've worked with a wide range of clients, from bands like the Chainsmokers to all these other brands and companies. What would you say draws you to a project, and how do you approach each new branding job?
I suppose, let's be honest, budgets are always an intriguing thing when it comes to choosing the right project. So, I'm not particularly picky at all when it comes to, I don't like focus my efforts on a particular industry or a particular style. I like to, I've got, if a client can afford my work and my process and wants to work the way I want to work, I'm in. And I like to think that I can use my skills as a brand identity designer to forge something fantastic for them, whatever it is. Obviously I do have my style, I have a certain way of thinking, and not that it was always the case, but now clients want to pay for that thinking, and they want to see what I can bring to the table for their project. I wouldn't say I'm a classically, I grew up an illustrator, I did a tattoo apprenticeship, so my creative direction and thinking is a little bit different. I do like to add a little bit more energy and a bit more, not all of my stuff obviously, but I do like to add quite a lot of character and personality to the brands. I'm not like somebody who just executes very geometric, slick, minimal designs 24/7. A brief will come to me and that brief will tell me where I need to be with it, and that could either be hand-drawn, illustrative, organic feeling, or clean, minimal, geometric, monoline, or whatever. So when it comes to clients, I'm like I said, I'm not fussy. If they want to work with me and the budget aligns with the cost to work with me and the timelines work, I'm anybody's. Literally. There are certain things obviously I won't do. I won't work for tobacco companies or anything like that. There's some moral stopping points, but anybody else, I'm in.
Got it. So a big focus for you in your design agency is logo design. And I want to mention that I was taking a look at your Instagram. I think you've got over 300,000 followers, right? And your backgrounds of almost all your photos and videos, you've got all these logos all around your wall and all this artwork. And so like for anyone who's listening to this and like can't see your background right now, like really like it's clear how obsessed and into logo design you are. And I've done logo design in the past when my business started as a web and graphic design agency. And so I can say I'm interested in it, but definitely not at the level that you are. So in your professional opinion, what would you say are some elements that really help to make a logo stand out, or I guess make a great logo in your eyes?
Yeah, again, very big question, but I can probably whittle it down a little bit. I think there are things that a logo has to do. I think a decent brand identity has to do 4 things, or should do 4 things. I think it has to work in application. So everybody who you work with needs their logo to do something different. There are standard things like it need to work on a website, but other people might be 100% online. Some people might be predominantly in print. So I think it's really important that whenever you're creating a logo, you think of the application of where that logo is going to be used, and not just like now, like future-proofing it as well. So application would be one, has to work in application. I think that allows us to talk about the second one, which is longevity, like not following trends, not jumping on colours because they're cool with Pantone this year or whatever it is, like making sure that you can give your designs longevity so they do last. Nothing lasts forever. Stuff does need updating, but whenever I'm creating something, I'm always thinking of like longevity. Like how can I give this a great, good lifespan? Audience, I would say, is number 3. I think as much as we have to love our work and our clients have to love our work, that work is being created for a group of people or a set of people, an audience or a community. So I think audience has to be really thought about, like who are you designing that for? So really understanding that person or that set of people allows you to communicate with them in the right way. And then finally, so we've had application, audience, and longevity. Finally, I would have to say, I mean, like memorability. I think it has to be, has to stand out. I think it has to be easily recognizable. And it has to do the job of a logo, which is obviously brand recognition. That's what it does. That's reason that they're there. They facilitate conversations. They start conversations. They sometimes stop conversations if they're not done particularly well. So, yeah, I would say those are the four things that I would rock with, which are application, audience, memorability, and longevity are the four things. I think, I mean, there's loads of other things. People might say simple, people might say other stuff, but for me, those are the four.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds great to me. I also want to bring up the idea of, with technology and everything, everyone's talking about AI now, and there's all these AI tools now that can create images, create logos, graphics for you. So do you feel positively about this? And where do you see like this technology potentially changing like the work of a designer like yourself?
No, it's a great question. Luckily, AI is shit at logos right now, which I'm quite happy for. They're really good at like image manipulation, but that's going to change. They will get better and better, and this software, this isn't going anywhere. Let's be totally honest. I think AI is going to become a very valuable tool for creative people. I think the creatives who can use AI are going to be the people that can win. Because we've got to remember that this software still needs creative input. It still needs like a human to build the things that it's building. And that stuff only gets better with the creative mind that's controlling it. Soon, it might even not need the creative. And I know certain things it doesn't necessarily need it so much, which is why it's built. But ultimately, I think you'd be silly to ignore it as a creative person. I think it's going to go through a bit of a rocky ride for the next year or two because of the implications of copyright, trademarks, and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be a bit dirty for a while until people start to kind of understand it and what it works, what they're allowed to do, and all the rest of it. But I think ultimately it's only something great if it's used by somebody great. So the creative mind is still going to be a very powerful tool. And what I've personally found, like since technology, especially over the last 20 years, kind of growing up in a world without social media, now growing up in a world with social media and AI, the clients are craving human connection. They're craving the need to work with people, and the world is very much, I think, trying to become more people first. It went through this phase of not being so much, but especially like with creative people, like people looking to partner on projects and want that human connection, and you can only get that via a human. Yes, you can get somebody to write your copy. Yes, you can get somebody to create a cool like profile picture of yourself using this AI software and all the stuff. There's going to be so many uses moving forward. I've seen like doing your taxes and stuff like that at the moment, which is pretty bonkers, like the new version of chat. So, I think it's a very exciting landscape and should be seen as such. If I was a brand new designer right now, starting my career, I would be using that stuff into my daily routine. That's what I would be doing. And I think people like me and yourself should be using its power, using our creative power, and partnering with it. Like I said, like for me in the brand identity space right now, I don't see too much of an issue. You know, people come to me for my brain, you know, and like anything, you know, there are going to be people who can afford Fiverr. There are going to be people who buy their stuff off Shutterstock, and there's going to be people who buy their stuff off AI or use that kind of software to do it slightly cheaper. But there's always going to be the people who want to spend money on the thinking of the connection of the deeper four, which is something that software can't bring at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think you still need to develop as a creative.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And about like what you're saying about the craving the human connection, definitely like I can see like people who are like, even if they say like, oh, I'm just gonna have the AI make a logo for me or something, but like some of those same people would also say like, I really just want to talk to somebody about this and the ideas and go over that with a human, and instead of just trying to say different things for the AI to generate something, and also how it can be used as a tool for creatives, where like one example I think is really applicable to like a brand identity or like logo design is like when you're working on a new logo, like at least for me, like come up with all these different concepts, tons of different concepts, and oftentimes it's just to help create that feedback loop for yourself to see like, now that I've made this, what do I think about this versus this? And being able to like generate some concepts of different styles with the AI to just give yourself that feedback loop faster and be able to see like, okay, now I've got all these different things. Now I can figure out, well, which direction do I really want to go with this? And like that kind of thing is where it can really like augment the ability of like a creator, I think, and become a powerful tool.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And it's not going anywhere. Like I said, so I think, it's like change is very difficult for people. People rebel against change. People love comfort zones. You know, we've had it great for so long, and now this thing is here, and we're going to rebel against it and slam it. But when you see it for what it is, which is an extremely intelligent tool, I don't think it's necessarily anything to be worried about. I'd be worried about it if I wasn't doing anything about it. And I think, like, as humans, like take COVID, we're all told to stay inside, we had to adapt to that situation, and we all did it very well, or we did what we were told, or whichever way you want to look at it. We adapt to change very quickly. That's what humans are so good at. But I think within the creative industry, you have to evolve or you die. And AI and these tools are essential and will be like, maybe not so now, but in a decade, they are going to be the thing. And when you go for your job interview or you go to work at an agency, it will be a standard practice that you will need to be proficient in these tools. So something to jump on now, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So one of your focuses today, together with your agency, is helping others grow and learn from your experience. And you've built an online course, you've written a book, and you have a newsletter for aspiring designers. So our audience is mainly composed of online course creators. Can you tell us a little bit more about your online course? Why did you build it, and how does it help people?
Yeah, so for a long time, I've been servicing clients, building brand identities, and what I decided to do last year, I think it was last year, beginning of last year, was create a very evergreen kind of brand identity course, like focused on logo design, like how I think, what a logo has to do, the kind of business side of design as well, and the process side of it, because I think that's a lot of the things that some creatives struggle with, is that they're very proficient creatively, but they don't really understand how to make money out of that creativity, don't understand how to maximize their profit with an efficient process. And that's the kind of thing I go into, like how my mind thinks, how I come up with ideas. And that was a wonderful experience, and something that I'm definitely going to be doing more of in the future. Because I don't know, like many course creators out here will probably feel the same as me. Like, what I've been doing is in my mind, and I do it like very effectively. But when you have to translate that to somebody else into a kind of very focused module or lesson, it's actually helping me think. How can I, like, being able to communicate what you do to other people is a powerful tool. Like, taking 20 years of knowledge and trying to wrap it into this was a 12-hour course, so there's quite a lot of it. But, even like if you're doing a workshop or doing a public speaking, like, to take all of that and try and dilute it, and like not necessarily dilute it, but kind of whittle it down into an hour talk or a 2-hour workshop, and trying to get people to understand how you do stuff. That is power. So that's what I really like about courses, is trying to take what I know and create it into some sort of vessel that somebody else can then take into their own world. I think that's the exciting thing about courses for me. But yeah, it did really well. I said, looking forward to doing more. And it helps me almost self-evaluate, which is quite exciting, which is an exciting thing I didn't think a course would do, which is fun, isn't it? Fun learning.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, that's a point that I don't think anyone else has brought up on this show before. And I think it's a really great point, that it's an enjoyable experience to think about, well, how can I take all this knowledge and condense it into something? And it's something that can help you as well in even doing that process. And I think that there's some beginners who might even get that wrong. And instead they think like, okay, I've learned all of this, so my course is going to be 1,000 lessons or something like this. But like the idea is you want to get your student from point A to point B as quickly as possible. So they don't want more information, they want the quickest way to get there. And so the unique challenge that you're presented with as a creator is figuring out, well, how can I condense all this knowledge, all these discoveries I've made along the way, and point the person to be able to make those discoveries themselves as quickly as possible.
Yeah. The kind of copywriting or editing of what you know is the essential bit. It's like, why say it in 3,000 words when you can say it in a paragraph? And that's the clever thing I found, was taking this and making it into this, but making this as powerful as this. That is the kind of quite interesting thing for me. And like I said, whenever I'm doing a public speaking thing or I'm doing a live workshop, that is the fun thing for me now. It's not actually what I'm teaching. It's like how I can cleverly pack all of this, give this so much punch, but make it like easy to remember. Because like you say, like what you want to do is you want to give value within a course or a workshop or whatever. You need to give the people who are there something to take away and use, and giving and breaking it down into its simplistic form, but still having the power that it does for you is the fun thing for me. Or trying to figure it out's the fun thing anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, like what I have said before was that, like, don't be mistaken to think that telling somebody that you have more lessons in your course is the better thing, because they want to get to the result quicker. But I guess what you should consider if you're working on your course and you're working on the next version of your course, instead of thinking what lessons should I be adding to this, think about how you can make it smaller, and think about how you can condense that and get the person to understand what you're communicating even quicker.
Yeah, and that's the other thing as well. That's what I learned from because that last year was my first course, and it was on a big subject of like the whole process. Whereas I think that's great in like an evergreen capacity because it never gets old and it can always be used. The thinking's always going to be there. But from now on, when I do courses, it will be focused in on a particular part and breaking that into detail. So I think that's quite an interesting thing for me with the courses, that you can kind of like, that obviously people only learn or only can kind of keep kind of their entertainment wise, you kind of want to keep them in as small a bundle as possible, but actually taking down, like, you don't have to do it all. You can take one part of that process and go into detail about that rather than trying to do like skimming across it all. And sometimes, like you say, like finding that thing, that pain point, going into detail about that is possibly more valuable than skimming over a whole load of stuff. So especially from my point of view, moving forward, it's going to be like smaller, compact kind of workshop style courses that go into detail on a particular subject, like a particular detail that I know that will help them make money and stuff moving forward.
Definitely.
But
yeah,
we're all different. It's interesting.
Completely agree with that. So on this show, we like to have each of our guests ask a question to the audience. So if you could ask the audience anything, it could be something that you're just genuinely curious about. It could be something that's more like an introspective question you want everybody to think about. What would that be?
I wrote this down. I wrote this down because you asked me earlier. So I have it in my mind. So it's, what can you be doing today that will help you to get to where you want to be tomorrow? That is something that I say to myself every single day. Like, what can I do today that's going to help me get to where I want to be? You know, and it's not about like not ever having time off or anything, but it's just about always in that execution mode, like we talked about earlier. You know, like there's always something that you can be doing, even if you're sick as hell. You know, I mean, if you're sick as hell, you can have a bit of time off, but there's still things you can be doing. You can be making notes. You could be like maybe replying to some emails. You know, obviously you do want to take some time off if you're super ill. I'm not saying you should work through your illness, but you know, there's always something that you can be doing to get you to where you want to be. So always ask yourself that question every single morning, because after a month, after a year, after 5 years, be amazed at what you can achieve if you're always executing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think early on in my business, I wasn't really doing that. And I think I was doing things and I felt like I was working. I felt like I was executing. But if you look back at those things that I was doing, it was kind of just this work that it wasn't really moving the needle forward. Whereas instead thinking about like, well, what can I do today that's going to actually improve tomorrow? That completely changes everything. And as you said, after doing that for a few years, it's amazing what the results can be.
Yeah, and I thought what they say is that don't let your busyness ruin your business. Do you know what I mean? So some people think like, you know, I'm being busy, I'm doing stuff, and you know, I'm hustling, I'm doing this, and sometimes you're actually going backwards doing that. So you know, like I said, like it's so I mean, you know, it's like really important. This is why we talked about earlier, knowing who you are, knowing what you do, knowing who you do it for. You know, if you're executing on these things all the time, you know, you can't go far wrong.
Yep, awesome. All right, I've got one more question for you, James, and that is, before we get going, where can people find you online?
The beauty of it now is because I've put so much content out into the world, all you have to do is type Made by James into Google and I'll pop up everywhere, which is great. But you can come to my website, themadebyjames.com. You can come and find me on any Instagram, LinkedIn or anything like that with James Martin or Made by James. But yeah, just type Made by James into anything and I'll be there. That's what you can do.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, James.
Thanks, buddy.